Hi, I'm Adam Porter and this is my board gaming vlog, and recently I've been doing a series of videos inspired by questions from my YouTube viewers. So this video is inspired by a question from Brian, who was asking about the relationship between designers and publishers, whether I had any insight on that. And I've just made a video to sort of precursor to this video about how to pitch your games to publishers and what that sort of process is like. But I'm talking here more about the broader sort of picture of designers and publishers and how you build a good relationship. Brian's question reminded me of an article I'd read through Mojo Nation. Mojo Nation put out a newsletter. I get it on Facebook, but they've got a really good website. Mojo Nation is a UK company that sort of promotes toy and game inventors and publishers and tries to bring them together. It's a fantastic organisation, well worth looking into. This article was by a man called Steve Reese, who is a toy company consultant. So Steve Reese had said he'd sat in on many pitches over many years on both sides. He'd been pitching and he'd received pitches. And he said in this industry it's very easy to get bored and blasé from pitches because you see so many of them, and so you end up with this factory-like approach. And you're not worrying about each individual pitch and each individual person just because you see so many of them. And he was saying that publishers need to think a lot more about how they build positive relationships with designers, because the right design from the right person could make them an awful lot of sales, an awful lot of money. So he was saying that they should put more focus on the human relationship and interact with the person, not just with the concept, which is exactly what I was talking about in my previous video about pitching, that for the designer, that's true as well. You're not just selling your concept to the publisher, you're also trying to get to know them, to build a relationship that can go on for years and last much longer than that individual game that you were trying to show them. So he was suggesting that the ways that you build this human relationship as a publisher were to, point the designer in the right direction, talk to them about other publishers might be interested in their game, even if you're not. Maybe advise them on some changes they could make with their game. Basically, be generous with them, generous with your own knowledge, and try and help them to develop as a designer. He also said that he felt publishers needed to think about clarity in the feedback that they give to designers, and that one certainly chimed with me. Just letting them know a yes or a no, or if it's a maybe, then letting them know what the sort of process is by which they're going to decide whether it's a yes or a no. There's nothing worse in this whole process as a designer than false hope. Okay, being told it's a maybe and then being kept hanging on for years. Keeping people in the loop. And that was another point that Steve Reese made, was about having clarity on the process, informing designers about delays, informing them about the development and the progress in their game. So all of this made me think about, what is my wish list? What is the stuff that I want from a publisher? So the first thing is I want them to be professional, I want them to be friendly, and I want them to be respectful of me and my games. Okay, so some publishers, in fact most publishers, are gamers. Okay, they have come from the hobby, through the hobby, they've started to self-publish, their company has grown, and they've taken on the business and they've moved it. So as a result, sometimes they can be very much like other gamers. They can talk about games in the same way. They can get excited about games. They can be extremely negative about games. And you can get the experience where they're very negative about your game and you get the impression that maybe they could have used a little more tact. That doesn't mean I don't want the negative feedback. I do want the negative feedback, but I want it to be done in a way that is respectful of the amount of time and love and craft that I've put into the game, and also acknowledging that their taste is just that. It's their taste. And that other people may have a different opinion. So that's one thing I want from a publisher, is basically be polite and be friendly with me. Remember who I am. That's useful. If you've met people before on several occasions, if you've had communication with them online and this sort of thing, then really, just remembering who you are and acknowledging you is a good step in the right sort of direction. Professionalism means things like be considerate of my time. I've often been kept waiting quite a lot by publishers and that's fine, absolutely fine. You know, I've also turned up late for appointments and had to be extremely apologetic about it, but that's the key bit, isn't it? Acknowledging that you've wasted someone's time, that you've inconvenienced them in some way, and trying to make amends and arranging another appointment, showing that you value the other person, not just kind of writing it off as, right, well, we've got 5 minutes now and that's it, you know, but actually looking at a solution that maintains that relationship. So how do you demonstrate to somebody, to a designer, that you value that designer? I think there are various different ways that you can show it, and I think it's important that you show it, not just that you kind of feel it. So it could be really simple. You know, I've had publishers who will find me a glass of water, or even better, a bottle of water at a convention, so I can drink a little bit of it now and I can carry it around and have a drink later. That is a wonderful gift to me at a convention. I've had publishers give me a shot of espresso or a small coffee or something like that. Great, I could really do with that at a convention. I've had publishers give me a little box of chocolates or some sweets, okay? Totally unnecessary. I really don't need that, but it shows that you value me. It shows that you care and you've thought about that you're going to be meeting somebody that you want to build a relationship with. I've had publishers give me samples of their games. I mean, that's wonderful. If a publisher can show me this is the sort of games that we make, this is the sort of games that we're looking for, so let me give you an example so that you can go away and explore it. That's great. I mean, the games that I buy a lot of games, and I would say probably 75% of those games, I'm buying them because I'm researching what sort of stuff publishers are making right now. I've got an idea of a publisher that I want to meet, that I want to work with, and so the first thing I need to do is play some of their games, and so I'll go out and buy some of those games. It's wonderful if a publisher can give me a sample. I love it when a publisher just says nice things. Of course I do. I'm a human being. You know, if somebody says to me, I loved your game Doodle Rush, they've recognised me, they've recognised my game Doodle Rush, that's fantastic. It makes me feel good. Okay, if they say to me that they liked my pitching approach, if they tell me that the video I sent them in the email was really, really helpful to them, then that makes me feel good. If they tell me things like, you know, you're the only designer we're meeting at this convention, or that, our catalogue is currently full, but I really felt like I wanted to meet you. Okay, I mean, it might be bullshit, I don't know, but it makes me feel good. So just making a connection with somebody, being generous and kind with somebody, and friendly, really helps to kind of build those relationships and makes me feel good about working with somebody. I go back to those same publishers time and again, just because they've given me a little bit of praise or they've given me some chocolate. You know, it just makes me want to build a relationship with that person. As that relationship grows, so beyond that initial pitch and where we're now starting to work together on developing a game, then the things that I want in my wish list, I want people to respond to my emails. Okay, I kind of forgiving of people not responding to my emails if I haven't worked with them, if they don't really know who I am. Then if they want to ignore my email, that's fine. I get cold calls from people and, on the phone, or I get emails from companies that I've really not got any interest in, approaching me about trying to sell me things, and I ignore them. So if a publisher ignores me, fine, okay, but I would like it if they responded to my emails when I'm actually working with them. And I'd like regular updates from them. Every 3 months or so, I think, is about what my ideal would be. I want to know how the game is progressing. I don't want to get to the final stages of the game and then suddenly have, right, here's the game in its finished form with its rulebook, and I've had no sort of real input into it at all. Next thing on my wish list, I want clarity over payments. I want to know, what I'm going to be paid, how I'm going to be paid, when I'm going to be paid, that sort of thing. Okay, I don't need fine detail, and I don't even mind if things are a little bit flexible and and payment dates move around and stuff like that. It's fine. I just want to be informed, and I want people, again, it's a respect thing. I want people to treat the business-like aspects, the contract, the payments, in a business-like manner. Okay, it can be awkward negotiating a contract. Sometimes you're asking for things that aren't there in the contract. You might be asking for an increase in your royalty percentage. You might be asking for a clause that goes in there that wasn't in there initially. And even if the answer to those questions is no, I don't want to feel that there's any bad feeling about that. This is a business relationship, and I think it goes two ways, and people should be willing to ask for things and discuss things in a professional sort of manner. Input is a tricky area. How much input do I want into my game and the development of my game after I've signed the contract? And the best answer I can come up with is a reasonable amount. What I don't want to do is redesign the game. I don't want somebody to sign a contract saying that they're taking on my game and then come back to me and say, all these things in the game don't work and I'd like you to change them. That makes me feel very uncomfortable. Aside from anything else, often with my games, by the time we get to those conversations where they're asking me to change them and play test extensive changes, I may not have played that game for months because I've moved on. I'm designing multiple games at any given time, and it's very hard to get back into that mindset of redesigning that game when I've got all these other projects on the go, and I thought that the deal was done and dusted, but now I'm having to redesign something. Also, the anxiety that comes with that. What if I can never get it to the place that the publisher wants it to be at? So I'm very happy to make tweaks to my games after they've been signed. I'm very happy to test them. I'm very happy to test ideas that publishers have put to me, but I don't want to redesign it from scratch. Okay, I want it to stay roughly the same game that I sold to the publisher. And when I say sold, that's another issue that I think is a tricky one between a designer and a publisher, is the issue of ownership. Who owns the game? Who owns the game Wingspan? Is that owned by Elizabeth Hargraves? Is that owned by Jamie Stegmaier, the publisher? And the answer is a bit of both, isn't it? Who owns my game Pikoko? Is it me? Is it Brain Games? Brain Games put a lot of work into that game. Okay, more work than I did. I put quite a bit of work in early on. I made the game, I came up with the ideas, okay, but I suspect in terms of sheer man hours, certainly in terms of money and effort and industry knowledge and everything else, Brain Games put the work in there. Okay, my idea is worth a lot. But I feel the ownership is both, we both own that game. And I suppose technically the game is on loan. When I sign a game to a publisher, I am loaning them that game. And it is theirs to do with as they wish, as long as they treat it with respect. It's similar to if you created a piece of art and then, licensed it to somebody for use, and you retain the copyright to that art. You wouldn't want them to, completely rework it and draw all over it and change your art, because that's going to damage your reputation. But ultimately, as long as they're reasonable in their use of that art, then you would be comfortable with that, right? And I think that's the same with board games. In terms of our relationship, designers and publishers, I'm looking for equality. Okay, I don't want to be treated as a junior partner. I'm a professional person in my professional life outside of dentistry. It's my profession. Okay, I'm a professional person outside of the board game industry. I want to be a professional person in the board game industry. I've got years and years and years and man hours invested into this hobby, this world. I've got a lot to offer, and I want to go in and talk as equals. Okay, there are solutions I can come up with. There's knowledge that I'll have that publishers don't have. There's a load of knowledge they have that I don't have. I want to work together on creating a product. I don't want to be begging and pleading for the publishers to kind of guide me through the process and produce my game. So I do pick and choose which publishers I work with, which publishers I approach. There are certain publishers that, I might not choose to go to because I don't particularly like their games, or it may be the style of the games. It may be that I don't like the artwork of the games. I may feel that the quality of the products they produce is a bit cheap, and I wouldn't really want to see that on my own games. It might be that I've met with the people and the personalities, I just don't jive with them. I just feel a little bit like we're not going to get on. I'm not quite getting that feel for them. So yeah, I definitely pick and choose who I work with, and I feel as a professional that's your right to do. I don't want this to be negative, because I have wonderful relationships with publishers. I meet with publishers all the time who've never produced any of my games, and yet I love meeting with them and having a chat with them and finding out what they're doing and every time there's always that hope that we can come up with something that's going to work for both of us. And with some publishers we've never quite got there. Other publishers I've worked with on multiple occasions. I approached a few publishers because I thought it was only fair that publishers get a bit of a say in this video about what they want from designers. So I asked specific questions of the publishers. I asked what sort of things can publishers do that make your life easier? What are the things that designers do that you wish that they wouldn't do? And what sort of things could designers do that would make you want to work with them again? So the first thing I'm going to do is play you a video, which is a Zoom call that I had with Gavin Ucko, who is who runs the publisher, the Happy Puzzle Company, who make the Genius Square, and they make my game Quazzle, which I co-designed with Rob Fisher.
So the first thing I would say is give us as much information as possible from the outset, so we know what we're working with. All too often, a designer comes to us and makes assumptions that we must know what they're talking about. And also, sometimes a designer's expectations are really not very realistic. So, you know, when we've taken on games before where people have then come back to me almost straight away and said, do you think you'll sell 50,000 in your first year? Well, no, that's not how it works. You've got to have realistic expectations. You've got to understand how the system works. You've also got to understand that things take time to do and they take time to get right. So to answer your question directly, it's really important. Best thing that the designer can do is give us their idea in full and then give us the space and the free rein to use our expertise to bring it to market in the right way.
And are there things that you specifically sort of don't want a designer to do? You know, what are the things that a designer does that makes your life difficult?
In fact, I've actually had a couple of occasions where I've actually pulled out of doing something because the designer just wouldn't let go. It was their way or the highway. And you sort of explain to them that for whatever reason, production reasons, practicality, the way they want to do it isn't going to work. And they don't always want to hear it. And I have dropped 2 ideas in the past because I've had to turn around to the designer and say, I'm so sorry, I can't work with you because nothing I ever do is good enough for them. And they've got to be able to let go. Interestingly, I've also had another situation where I worked with a designer who literally wouldn't stop sending me information, and by the time we'd finished, he had sent me almost 500 puzzles for his game that he'd created, and you know, I only wanted 48, and the 48 that he sent me were absolutely fine, and I got variations, and I got hundreds and hundreds of images and emails, and I tried very, very nicely to sort of say, it's fine, we're okay, but he just wouldn't stop. And some people just don't listen.
Do you think there's an issue of, one thing I've kind of thought about a lot over the years, and I've seen different designers struggle with, is the issue of sort of ownership. So for example, like with Quazzle, of our game, you know, you have ownership of Quazzle as the Happy Puzzle Company. You've put a lot of work into it. It's very much your product, and it has your design and everything on it. But then I also own it, and Rob, my co-designer, he also owns it. And so you've got that sort of potential there for difficulties when people get very attached to something that they own, and there's nothing clearly which says, you know, this is this. I mean, legally, you know where you stand legally, but in terms of, you know, feelings and emotions, people can get quite caught up in that, can't they?
Well, I think we operate in a particularly unusual way. My belief is that for the designer, this is their baby. This is something which they've created, and we have a responsibility to respect that. So, as was the case with Quazzle, if there's something that doesn't need changing, we're not going to change it. You know, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. We're not going to make changes for the sake of it. And if we do make changes, then it's really important that the designer becomes part of that process so that they continue to have that sense of ownership. And we have to be open and honest if there's things that are not practical, if there's things that we want to change. Now, I obviously acknowledge that, you know, there are some companies out there who don't have the time to do stuff like that. But I think that that's why we are the company that we are in giving people that opportunity. Now, depending on the designer, where we've got something which is pretty complex, and particularly, you see, in the case of Quazzle, everything was straightforward from start to finish, and we were very, very true to your original design, which was what we always want to do. But sometimes when that's not possible, and that particularly starts happening when you're dealing with plastic moldings, I'll actually bring the designer into the process of discussions with the manufacturer, because I want their input, and I also want them to feel that they're involved. And I think you've seen that from the point of view that your second game you've done for us, you've designed specifically with us in mind, because you've got a grasp of how we work, what sort of thing we want, and you've got it right. So it's a two-way process, but it's incredibly important that we respect the work that's come to us, and that we keep it as close to the original as we can.
Yeah, so that brings me on to my last question, really, which is about what makes you want to work with somebody again? When you work with recurring designers, what is it that makes you think, okay, this is somebody that I'm happy to work with, or I would like to work with again?
I want to see that we are making a difference to that person. I want to see that, and I could tell you so many stories, but at the moment there's a game which we're producing, which was made 20 years ago by a husband and wife who just did it because they were bored, and it went in the loft, and they spotted a similar type of genre of game that we were advertising in the press. And so they went and took it out of the loft and said, do you mind if we send this to you? And it was absolutely jaw-droppingly brilliant. For the moment I saw it, I was like, yes, we're going to do that. And the joy that is coming to them, and it's really tangible, that you can see how much it means to them. And if you contrast that with the person I talked about who's sent us 500 puzzles for his game, I can't cope with it. It's got to be somebody who listens. And when I turn around and say, you don't need to send me any more, that they carry on doing it. And, in this case, it's eating into my time. Either give us the game or don't give us the game. But if you give us the game, you're giving it to us because we know how to bring it to market in the right way. So let us get on with our bit. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of levels to this. I think when you engage with people, when you see how happy it makes them, and ultimately as well, if you get on with them, and when you know that you're going to see them, you need to be pleased to see them, not be looking at your watch and saying, God, how long till I can get out of here?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like building a friendship.
So Gavin was extremely generous in giving me his time last week to record that little interview. But I also got some communication from Jamie Stegmaier from Hadi Barkat, Jamie Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games, and Hadi Barkat from Helvetique. So I've got them on my laptop here from Stonemaier Games. So Jamie said, what can designers do to make your job easier? Well, he said all of the designers with whom he works at Stonemaier Games do something amazing that they may not even realise, and that is communicate with him in the format that he prefers the most, which is email. Super helpful. They recognise this early in the relationship. When I email them, they email me back instead of calling, Skyping, Facebook messaging, etc. That's how they initiate contact as well. And the success of any project is dependent upon that communication. And I think that's true. Every publisher is different. You can see that I talk to Gavin from Happy Puzzle Company, usually on the phone or by Skype, often by email as well. But some people don't like that, and you've got to get a feel for that. You've got to get a feel for how this publisher wants to communicate. Jamie is also, he comments, he talks about, we talked about this previously, about finances and about being considerate about finances, considerate in how you communicate about payments and things like this. So, not chasing publishers down, pestering them for payments, but having, respectful conversations and sharing information. which I think is very true. You know, he says he doesn't want to be guessing out of thin air how much he's going to be paying somebody. He wants to give the information when he has it available. Another thing he said, that I wish designers would refer to our rule books as style guides when writing the preliminary rules for their game, or just ask for a style guide. That makes the editing process much easier later in the process. Of course, as a publisher, this is something I should bring up with designers. So yeah, so he wants the rules written in a format that he can work with, that Stonemaier Games uses. And I think if you go back to my video about writing rules, I talk about that, trying to kind of write your rules in a format for a publisher that you've got in mind. You know, if you've got a publisher in mind, then you base your rules format on a style that they've used in the past. What makes you want to work with a designer again? He says it's about how they receive constructive criticism and ideas. I throw a lot of thoughts at our designers throughout the development process, and I don't want them to say yes to all of them or no to all of them, but I do want them to read and consider my input, and often to test it. So I guess that comes back to what I was talking about how much input do I want. I don't want to be redesigning the game from scratch, but I don't mind doing some tests, and I don't mind making some tweaks. And I guess it goes both ways then, doesn't it? And you have to both direction be considerate of what the other person needs. So then Hadi Barkat also sent me an email from Helvetique. So Hadi said, what can designers do to make your job easier? He said, with so many games hitting the market, design a game-changing game. Design something that's more risky, that matters. And he sees value in designers promoting themselves, promoting their games, both online and offline. So, you know, that's what this channel's about, really, isn't it? I'm trying to be present in the industry, even when I can't meet with publishers, meet with other designers, go to conventions. I like to produce these videos, and it helps to keep my games sort of visible and out there as well. And I do attend toy fairs. Recently, I was with Happy Puzzle Company for several days at the London Toy Fair promoting my game Quazzle. And so I think it's useful to be willing to do those sort of things as a designer. What's next? Designers. Okay, so understanding that the success rate for games is not very high, and that the designer-publisher partnership is about finding the recipe for success together. And I think that's true. I think there's a lot of risk in this. You know, there's a high chance that your game will not succeed, and you can't put that all on the publisher. Okay, everybody's in it together trying to create these games in a very, very crowded market. Hadi is not. Hadi says Helvetique don't send prototypes back to designers. They review so many games that it would be very expensive and time consuming, I would imagine, to do so. And this comes back to what I was saying in my pitching video that I posted earlier, that I think you've got to consider when you give a prototype to a publisher that it is a gift. It's not you shouldn't be expecting it back. It's lovely if they can send it back, and a lot of publishers do, but I don't think it's a given. And Hadi also says that print and play files he does accept games by print and play files, but having a physical prototype is so much more helpful to him because it means he can get it played so much quicker and start getting that feedback back to you. So when asked what makes you want to work with a designer again, Hadi said audacious creativity, creative ambition, positive energy, and he said we like it so much when we work with designers again and again. And one publisher that I've worked with on multiple occasions, well, 2 occasions in fact, is Brain Games, who made my game Pikoko and my game Doodle Rush, and I have another game in the works with them, which hopefully will be out at some point in the next year or, well, who knows how long in this COVID world. So Janis Grunter from Brain Games also replied to my questions. So what can designers do to make your job easier? Janis said if they can help out with solving something in the game that we, the publisher, think should be changed in the game or added, like a small expansion or a rules change. If we have a contract signed, the author does not have to do this, but it does help a lot if they do. And of course, this is one of the things that I mentioned earlier, that I'm very happy to make tweaks to games, but I don't want to completely redesign the game, and that delicate sort of balance of being helpful, but not completely spending all of your time on redesigning stuff that you've already made. What do designers do which you wish they wouldn't? Yanis got hung on that one. He said he's never met an author that has done anything that he wished they wouldn't have done, which is very kind of him to say. Maybe it's just that I'm that difficult author, and so he's struggling to say anything for fear of upsetting me. What makes you want to work with a designer again? First and foremost, ease of communication and compromises, and a well-selling game, of course. As board game publishing is a business, sometimes the company might have delays on some things because of different reasons, and it does help if the author understands and can make compromises, and it works both ways. Sometimes the publisher has to do it too. And again, I think we can see there that the answer really is communication and being adaptable and flexible with each other. It's about responding to each other's needs, responding to each other's emails in the format that people want, giving them the information they want, being clear, being open, being polite. But largely, it's just about communicating with each other. If you enjoyed the video, please do watch some of my others. Earlier, I posted a video about pitching to publishers that might be interesting if you found this video interesting, but there are lots of videos about all sorts of game design topics and about board games in general on my channel, Adam's Board Game Wales. On Twitter, I'm at Board Game Wales, and on Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. Thank you very much for watching. All the best.